June 12th, 2018 meeting of the City Council of the City of Fredericksburg. We will be led in invocation this evening by Councilor Brad Ellis, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. We will be led in the pledge by Scout Gabriel Stoll of Troop 1717. And Mr. Stoll, if you don't mind coming forward you have to come around. There you go. So that you can be in place when the invocation is over. Just right there will be fine, and Miss Councilor Ellis will lead us in the invocation first.
Heavenly Father, send down upon us those who hold office in this great city the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose we may faithfully serve in our offices to promote the well-being of all people. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will proceed. We do not have a presentation and we do not have any public hearings this evening. I will say Dr. Duffy is with us by telephone. Unfortunately, he has injured his back and cannot be present here in the chambers this evening, but he is with us by telephone and may be able to speak accordingly. And according to our rules and the Code of Virginia, is allowed to participate in that way in the council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. Present and accounted for. We come to our section of the meeting where we allow comments from citizens who've signed up to speak before the meeting. And to be fair to everyone, please observe the 5-minute time limit and yield the floor when the clerk of council indicates your time is expired. We have one person signed up to speak this evening, and it is Pastor Ann Jones Martin of Christ Lutheran Church. Pastor Martin, would you please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record as this meeting is recorded?
Ann Jones Martin, 1300 Augustine Avenue, Fredericksburg, 22401.
Thank you.
I wanted to just address the council for a moment regarding the resident permit parking plan that's being proposed for the College Heights neighborhood. As you know, Christ Lutheran is positioned on Augustine Avenue, and we have Brent Street on one side and Dandridge Street on the other side of our property. And we have enjoyed a wonderful relationship with that neighborhood for 70 years, as well as the Civic Association. It's just been a joy to be positioned where we are. We do have a small parking lot that has 12 spaces. That parking lot accommodates our staff during the work week and regular business hours, so we're not using street parking for our staff. But during the week, Monday through Friday, different church activities are held in our building. We have a preschool that operates throughout the week during the business hours, civic meetings and community meetings, including a food pantry and a community meal on Wednesdays that do happen between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And so we would like to ask the council to consider that the streets that border our property, that the resident-only permit parking signs would not be posted on Brent, Dandridge, and Augustine to allow for our weekday activities to continue, because as the proposal is currently presented, it would be a challenge to our regular activities as a church community during the week. Would you like me to read the letter?
Just reference if you like that you did.
You can reference the letter. We appreciate your...
I did submit a letter to Mr. Fawcett and Sergeant Worley, as well as a chart that kind of details our regular traffic flow in and out of our building.
Good. That's helpful.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So that will become part of the public record as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That concludes the number of speakers who have signed up to speak before the meeting. I should also state that Councilor Frye is on his way. He has been detained at work, but he is on his way. Is there any councilor who would like to add something to the council agenda? Hearing none, we will proceed to the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 5-0.
I'll vote yes on that.
Okay, 6-0.
Thank you, Councilor Duffy. We'll try not to forget you. Item number 9, we have 5 sets of minutes before us. The work session of March 27th, April 10th, April 17th, April 24th, and May 8th. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Madam Mayor, I move approval of minutes as submitted.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion passes
Yes.
6-0.
Thank you. Boards and commissions, we have 1 vacancy on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and thankfully, we have 4 excellent candidates. Madam Clerk, do you want to poll the council?
Sure.
You might start with Dr. Duffy.
Dr. Duffy?
Mr. Cameron John.
Counselor Devine?
I abstain.
Counselor Ellis?
Cameron John.
Counselor Kelly?
Brandon Beecham.
Vice Mayor Withers?
Cameron John.
Mayor Greenlaw?
Cameron John,
Cameron John with 4 votes.
yes. I should explain Cameron John is a young man who has spent a lot of time volunteering with Parks and Rec and happens to be the son of Councilor Devine, which is why she so nicely abstained. I'm not sure I would have. City Manager's Agenda, item 11A. I will call on Mr. Fawcett for our submittal of smart scale applications. It's easier to get to the podium.
I'll
Yeah.
try not to exceed the time limit. We've talked a lot about smart scale and the next round of smart scale funding, which is, for those of you that aren't as familiar with the term, is a Virginia Department of Transportation funding program that has evolved over the past few years as somewhat of a consolidation of a variety of previous VDOT programs, and it has become the primary means that the state uses to fund local and regional projects. The next round of financing is coming up, and the city must formally commit to the project's applications it wants to submit by August 1. But what is before you tonight is a recommendation authorizing staff to proceed with preparing those projects and endorsing the staff's recommendation. Under the rules of the program, the city and Fred may each submit 4 applications. Now, that is in addition to projects that FAMPO, GWRC, and each of the counties in the region and in the FAMPO area may submit. So you can see that there is quite an opportunity for local and regional projects to be submitted. The projects that have been taken from the city's comprehensive plan and that are ready for submittal are these 4. The Gateway Boulevard Extended project between Route 3 and Cowan Boulevard. The Lafayette Boulevard, Kenmore Avenue, and Charles Street Roundabout project, which Council's been briefed on that before. That would replace the 2 older traffic signals very close to one another at Lafayette Charles and Lafayette Kenmore. The Fall Hill Avenue and US Route 1 intersection improvements, which came out of the what's known as the STARS Route 1 corridor study, and Dixon Street and Lansdowne Road intersection improvements, which is designed to improve the traffic flow through that intersection, which has become a particular problem at various times of the day, but especially in the evening rush hour, as motorists, not just from the city, but motorists exit I-95 at exit 130, take the Blue-Gray Parkway to Dixon Street and turn south to go south beyond the city to areas in Spotsylvania County down toward the New Post area. The transit projects to be submitted by Fred include the following: transit shelters and benches at 25 Fred bus stops. Sorry Mr. Fry isn't here to hear that, but we'll make sure that he's in the loop on that. He has asked for a number of bus stops in his ward recently. Electronic fare boxes on Fred buses. Parking lot development at Fred Central. Fred Central currently has an arrangement with an adjacent property owner for staff parking. However, that private property is currently for sale, and it could be sold and turned into a different use in which the new owner might not be as receptive to having parking during the day on the property. So we need to make some future plans for Fred Central staff parking particularly. Solar panels at Fred Central, and a new commuter parking lot on Route 3 in Stafford County. As we know, Fred is a regional operation. So I have stalled long enough for Eric to arrive to answer your questions about this project. Where is he? He'll hobble up here to the microphone, and Eric will be glad to answer your questions about this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Fawcett. Are there any questions from Mr. Nelson? Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Eric, with regards to the Lansdowne Road improvements, I know this is also a big deal in conversations in Spotsylvania County. Are we coordinating with them on their plans and developments of Lansdowne, or is this more of an intermediate improvement before we get into bigger things?
We are. We're sharing the data, certainly, and the potential configurations. They will also be submitting a similar project, but it will include additional intersections on the Route 2 and 17 corridor. So we're hitting this, and you're seeing this in a couple of these projects that are going forward, is that they're being submitted in different configurations, different ways, in hopes that at least one of them will hit and be successful.
Okay. Thank you. Just a quick comment, and I hate beating a dead horse, but it's a very important dead horse for the city, is to just put a little context in what we're talking about, and I don't have any issues with the projects being submitted. Last round of smart scale, and this is 2 years out, so anything that's approved now, that doesn't start out for another 2 years, by the way, it doesn't come right away. Last round of smart scale, there were $1 billion available, split into two pots of money. There were $9 billion of projects submitted throughout the state for that money. What we're looking at here applying for is what is called statewide significance, which I think this time is roughly $480 million. And then there's $480 million of what are called district grants. Our portion of the district grants is roughly 37 million. And so just to kind of put this in perspective, we did put a recommendation before the General Assembly this session to make some changes to Smart Scale, which is not doing us many favors, none of which even made it out of committee. So we are, as a city, going to have to start doing more and more on our own unless some significant changes are made in Richmond on how we fund some of these projects. I do think we'll get some projects, but I think the bigger ones are going to be very difficult to get funded, noting the competition and the fact that Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads can throw hundreds of $millions on top of their projects to put them in a better position to move them forward. Thank you.
It's worth noting that we are benefiting significantly by funding that's already in place. There's over $200 million of improvements to the interchange or the interstate. So we're reaping a fair amount of benefit already. Hopefully we can build on that, but there's never going to be enough funding for what we claim to be is needed. And I think, and I brought this up at FANPO, that we ought not to be suggesting that what we claim is needed is realistic. We can't claim 10 times amount of need compared to what's available, and that's just not a realistic way to proceed.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you, but the issue we're having now, even with the improvements that are being made, is, and we've had this conversation with the Secretary of Transportation just as of 2 weeks ago, you can spend $1.5 billion on 95, but if you don't get it past a certain point, those improvements aren't going to be doing us much good. One, two, why are we, as local governments, being involved in the interstate business in the first place? It should be our responsibility to begin with. And three, could you guys please get off your you-know-whats and start really being serious about funding transportation properly? That's it. Thanks.
Typically, at my level, we don't say that.
Any other questions for Mr. Nelson? Thank you. I should note and thank the officers who were present with us this evening, Officers Schaefer, Arameo, and Elliott.
Madam Mayor, I'll move resolution supporting submittal of smart scale applications.
Second.
Thank you. Forgot we had to vote. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes
I vote yes.
6-0.
Item 11B is a first read resolution appropriating funds in the Wastewater Enterprise Fund and the Wastewater System Improvement Fund. Mr. Whitley?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. The item you have before you this evening is item 11B, is a first reading on a budget amendment that will enable the city to fund a piece of a larger puzzle where we have a proposal for a comprehensive agreement with vendor W.C. Spratt. The basic outline of what you'll see, and I'll describe it a little more in a minute, is that the original proposal and the original estimates had a certain amount in the water and a certain amount in the sewer. And as we worked through and revised and sort of brought things further up the priority list, we decided that we needed a little more sewer, a little less water. So because these two funds are separate, you have a budget amendment before you to recognize that we need a little more appropriation in the sewer fund to handle it. So that's a brief introduction, and I'll call on Mr. Fawcett to give you an overview of some of the projects that we're discussing.
May I have the computer? There we are. All right, I'd like to run through very briefly with you what projects are proposed for funding. The approval of the comprehensive agreement, which is the general term for the contract with the contractor for a PPEA, which stands for Public-Private Utilities and Education Act, which is a state act that is basically a design-build contract type of approach. The city has used this a number of times for utilities projects and for certain other projects as well. We will bring the comprehensive agreement to council with a recommendation for approval at the next meeting on the 26th. The scope of work of the 6 projects that are proposed to be undertaken are as shown there, and I'm not going to read all those to you because I'm going to give you a slide on each one of them with a very brief description of what each project is. The Upper Caroline Street Sanitary Sewer Improvements Project would be from Ford Street north along Caroline Street. The existing lines are old and need to be replaced, and it involves, in some, at least some of the area, replacement of 2 parallel existing gravity sewer lines with a single line. Sometimes in areas of the city, and this is not the first time we've encountered this, when there was need for additional sanitary service or new development, a second parallel line was added simply as opposed to building a bigger line at that time. And that has functioned properly for the time it's been in the ground, but when you get opportunity to consolidate lines of that type, you want to do it in a single larger line. Went the wrong way, sorry. The Greenbrier Drive Water System Improvement Project is designed to improve fire flow as well as domestic flow to the area. This is a project that was identified in a 2012 water needs study in the city, and it basically consists of replacement of an existing 6-inch line with a 12-inch ductile iron water line in the Greenbrier Drive area south of the Blue and Gray Parkway and toward Alum Spring Park. The William Street stormwater system improvements, which the location is from the intersection of William and Sunken Road down the hill to Kenmore Avenue, and the purpose of this project is to correct system capacity issues that have resulted during heavy rain periods in surcharges or overflowing of manholes. There's a manhole on William right there at Sunken that if you travel in that area sometimes after particularly hard rain, you'll see the lid of the manhole slightly floating above the manhole, and that's not a good thing in a stormwater system. The College Terrace water and sanitary sewer improvements in the area neighborhood below the college, essentially between Sunken Road and Kenmore Avenue. Replacement and improvements on and near Grove Avenue to address some sewer backup issues that have arisen just in the past 15 months or so. We've had more than one occasion of some backups in homes in that area. We are studying that now through the consultant that will be involved in this contract, the partner with the contractor. So we're not prepared tonight to say in detail what those improvements would be, but we're studying both capacity issues and other issues that might be contributing to the issues that we're having, and we will determine the improvements to be made based on the results of that. And then it's also involves replacement of certain aged water lines in that same general area. The National Park sanitary sewer line, you may or may not be aware that the city has a collector sewer that runs parallel to Lafayette Boulevard behind the homes at the end of Morningside Drive, and that portion of the city that runs essentially from Greenwich Village, Old Greenwich Village, behind those homes and parallel to Lafayette Boulevard through National Park Service property, and eventually runs through the Battlefield Industrial Park and into the Hazel Run Interceptor sewer. The existing sewer in that area is aged and needs replacement. As you might imagine, since it is on National Park Service property, it will require very extensive coordination with the National Park Service and other regulatory agencies. And what is included in this proposed comprehensive agreement is what we call Phase 1 services for that. There are not funds for the actual construction of that, reconstruction or replacement of that line, but there are funds for the various due diligence activities that will have to be undertaken, including permitting and design, and in such areas as archaeological, environmental, and cultural sensitivities of the area. And the final project is the Lower Caroline Street sanitary sewer improvements. This is what we might call an overlap, or this is in some ways kind of a finishing up of the most recent comprehensive agreement. You may recall that when we began the work that through the downtown on Caroline Street a couple years ago, it was a water project, a clean water supply project. As we got to the lower end of the commercial district, we discovered that the sanitary sewer starting at about Wolf Street and going south needed also to be addressed. This is the very last block of that work. And the reason it wasn't done under the previous comprehensive agreement was because we had reached the maximum change order level that we could use under the previous comprehensive agreement in taking on the other sanitary sewer issues. So this is the block of Caroline Street from Dixon Street south to basically the Hughes home, the south end, dead end of Caroline Street. The need for this work, as I've already referenced, was discovered during the Waterline project in 2017. The proposed comprehensive agreement amount for these total improvements is just over $4.9 million. And assuming council approves the comprehensive agreement at its next meeting, the work will begin very soon and will extend into early 2020. And I'll be glad to answer any questions or comments councilors have about it.
Are there any questions for Mr. Fawcett? Thank you very much. This item is on the agenda for a first read tonight.
And I'm also happy to answer any questions.
And Mr.
I will
Whitley
continue to-
can answer any questions regarding the financing of this.
Madam Mayor, I move first read approve the fiscal year 2019 budget amendment appropriating funds in the wastewater enterprise fund and the wastewater system improvement fund.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion passes
I vote yes.
6-0.
Thank you. Item 11C is the item repealing the restrictions on parking in public streets near UMW. Mr. Fawcett.
The next two items on your agenda are very much related,
They are indeed.
and they are a package. I think it's fair to say that I certainly wouldn't, and I don't think the Parking Advisory Committee would recommend that you eventually adopt one without the other, because they are very related, and I will speak to that in just a moment. The first one is, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself here. We can take the screen back down for a minute. The first one is the proposed repeal of the parking restrictions on University of Mary Washington resident commuter students on certain city streets. As of today, there is a long list of streets listed in the city code on which University of Mary Washington resident students, and then in a separate section of the code, University of Mary Washington commuter students are prohibited from parking. This goes back, I believe, to the early 1990s. And at that time, the then City Council chose the approach of literally listing all of the streets and all of the blocks of all the streets in the neighborhoods adjacent to the University of Mary Washington campus on which University of Mary Washington's student parking was prohibited. We have, that's very visible as you drive around those neighborhoods today. There are many blocks in those neighborhoods that have the signs posted no UMW student parking. When the Walker Parking Action Plan was completed in early 2017, one of the recommendations of the consultant and one of the recommendations the city has embraced is the removal of those signs from city streets for a variety of reasons. However, it's not feasible to simply remove those signs, thus open up all those streets in the neighborhoods to student parking, so it's necessary to take some additional action as well. Now, I am prepared to address that additional action under the next item on council, so I can either pause and ask you all to act on this particular resolution, or I can finish my presentation and ask you to consider them together.
I would prefer that you finish your presentation. How's the rest of the
I
council
agree.
feel? Okay.
All right, now we can go back to the screen. I apologize for the confusion. The next item on your agenda, the parallel and companion ordinance, is proposed amendments to the city's resident permit parking program, and including addressing the specific issue that I just finished talking about. So I will get to that during my presentation. You have before you an ordinance scheduled for first reading tonight that accomplishes several general revisions to the city's resident permit parking program. And I might pause to say that throughout the process, your Parking Advisory Committee has been working on this and has recommended all of the actions that you see before you tonight and has endorsed all of those actions. The first thing that you would do is to repeal the list of streets on which a resident permit parking zone may be established. Just as there currently is in the city code a long list of streets on which UMW students are not permitted to park, in another section of the city code, other sections, multiple sections, there are long lists of streets on which resident permit parking zones may be established if certain criteria are met. And those are divided into several zones. There's the commuter train station resident permit parking zone, there's the downtown business district parking zone, etc. Just as is being recommended in the case of the student parking prohibitions, the recommendation here is to repeal those sections, thus in effect making all streets in the city eligible if the criteria is met. You all just in the last few years have, on a case-by-case basis, expanded the list a couple years ago, you expanded it to north of William Street to just at Lewis Street, for example. And various councils over the years have even adopted single streets. The 200 block of Pitt Street a couple years ago, when the Red Dragon Brewery opened, you all brought that street in so that resident permit parking could be established there. It does not create, obviously, the entire city as a resident permit parking zone, but it eliminates this requirement that your block, if you're a resident, has to be listed in the city code for it to get over the first hurdle, so to speak, to create a resident permit parking zone. The second thing is it amends the standards for establishing a zone. This comes out of the parking action plan as well. We didn't land on exactly the recommendation that the consultant made, that Walker made, but basically reducing from 14 to 7 days the length of the required parking survey. The way the RPPZ parking zone system works is the property owners on a block have to petition for the creation of a zone. Then Public Works performs a parking survey to determine parking space occupancy. And if you meet certain thresholds on any 14 days in a 30-day period, then the zone can be established. This basically cuts that in half and just simply reduces the number of days that it has to meet the criteria in a certain period before the zone can be established. The third general revision is establishing a procedure for terminating a resident permit parking zone. There's currently nothing in the city code that says if a zone has been created but the current property owners don't want the zone, or if the nature of the neighborhood has changed to where it's not really a residential neighborhood anymore, there's no provisions in the city code for terminating that zone. When this was first presented to the council, or to the Parking Advisory Committee for discussion, staff recommended that the city manager be given that authority, but the Parking Advisory Committee said what they wanted to do was, if the property owners petition for the termination of the zone, then the city manager would have the authority to review that petition and determine that, yes, in fact, that's appropriate, and terminate the zone. However, if the city, by its own action, if city staff recommends, or if a city councilor would propose that a parking zone be terminated for any other reason, then only city council would require a majority vote of city council to terminate the zone in that case, thus protecting the property owners in that area from what might be considered to be arbitrary action by staff. The next general one is, and this is one that grew out of all the discussions after the receipt of the parking plan. It would specifically authorize the city manager to establish 2-hour or some other hour parking except by permit. The way it's worded in the ordinance is it authorizes the city manager to exempt residents from the parking time restrictions in zones in which parking is otherwise restricted to a certain time period. We believe that there are a number of areas in the fringe areas surrounding the downtown where this may be appropriate. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more in a moment about the use of this in the College Heights and the proposed use of this in the College Heights and College Terrace neighborhoods. Those are the general proposed revisions to the provisions of the city code. Now for the specific ones that you've heard a lot about recently, it would establish the College Heights and College Terrace resident permit parking zones. I realize it's not maybe as visible as we would hope, but here is a map of the College Heights area. I will give you your bearings. This is Jefferson Davis Highway, College Avenue, William Street, and the last street on this end of the map that has blue on it is Stafford Avenue. The proposal is to establish resident permit parking zone in College Heights on most blocks in that rectangle between the residential side of College Avenue, across the street from the university side of College Avenue, to the nearest side of Stafford Avenue. I guess that's the north side of Stafford Avenue. So if you're traveling from William Street toward the bus station, The right side would be included in the resident permit parking zone, the left side would not. Now, there are a couple of exceptions in the box. Some very heavily discussed is the area along a certain frontage of College Avenue across the street from the university campus. And after much discussion and consideration of this matter, what is being recommended is that the 12 and 1300 blocks of College Avenue as you come off of William Street be in the resident permit parking zone, but then the next 3 blocks be 2 hours except by permit. There are fewer residents in those blocks requiring on-street parking and they will be given permits under the proposed system. They would be given decals permitting them to park on College Avenue if a space is available, but also their permit would permit them to park on the perpendicular streets to those blocks as well. Then coming back to the 17 and 1800 blocks of College Avenue, going back to the resident permit parking zone, and then we get to the college steam plant, which is all owned by the university. Blocks and areas on which the university owns all the street frontage, for example, the west side of Thornton Street, are exempted from the proposed resident permit parking zones because there are no private residences on those sides of the street. The other exception, if you can see it right here, is the area that was discussed earlier tonight near Christ Lutheran Church, where along the church property on Augustine Avenue, and the church is the only property in that block, as well as on Brent and Dandridge Streets, the church frontage on those streets would be, under the proposal, signed as 2 hours except by permit. Now, I believe the difference between what Pastor Martin is proposing and what is on this map, she has proposed that occur on both sides of those streets. The proposal is only along the church frontage because there are residences directly across the streets of all those streets that comprise the church frontage. And so we would be changing the resident permit parking zone directly in front of residences if we accommodated that request. Moving on, and I'll be glad to come back to these, I'm sure there'll be discussion. In what we're, for sake of convenience, calling the College Heights South neighborhood, I'm not trying to convince people to start calling it that regularly, but just for convenience tonight, there is a triangle of residential area bordered by William Street. Let me get where's my arrow? Showing? Not showing, is it? William Street, running through the middle from lower left to upper right of the, do I need to hold it down? Nope, that doesn't make it work at all, does it? From lower left to upper right is William, coming back down with where you can see the blue is College Avenue from William to Hanover, and then completing the triangle going back down Hanover Street to the point of connection between William and Hanover in the lower quadrant of the map there. For point of reference are the University of Mary Washington athletic fields. What is proposed in this neighborhood in red is resident permit parking only, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturdays. That is to accommodate the fairly significant weekend activity at the athletic fields. The eastern side of College Avenue between Hanover and William is currently proposed as 2-hour parking except by permit. That's after discussion, and there will be more discussion with Trinity Episcopal Church, who have some of the same concerns as was expressed to you tonight by Pastor Martin. We're continuing that discussion, and I would ask that the council understand that these maps may be changed slightly, probably not dramatically, but slightly between now and 2 weeks from now, when, if you pass first reading tonight, you'll be asked to pass second and final reading. The third area, and I understand this is a different map, different type of map, is the College Terrace neighborhood. The boundaries of this neighborhood for purposes of parking are essentially William Street, Sunken Road, Fitzhugh Street, and Kenmore Avenue. The areas shown in green on this map are blocks that currently have some type of parking restrictions, either the no UMW student parking signs or some of them are already resident permit parking. After a meeting with the representatives of this neighborhood, the decision was made when this map was first presented. There, you see the options up at the top there that were given to the residents, and there was, I won't say a strong consensus, but there was a consensus that the residents in that neighborhood preferred the 2-hour parking except by permit, 8 to 7 Monday through Friday. This neighborhood is somewhat less attractive as an all-day parking area for University of Mary Washington faculty, staff, and students. And the best way I've come up with describing that is because there's not only a horizontal separation from the university campus here, but unlike in the College Heights area, there's also a vertical separation between this neighborhood. This is well down the hill. And so this neighborhood experiences some, but not as significant parking in the neighborhood by those parking and then going to the university campus, and in most cases staying an extended period of time. So that's the reason why those that are making this recommendation believe that the 2-hour except by permit will work in this neighborhood, whereas it would be less likely to do so in the College Heights neighborhood. There are 2 recommendations that are not referenced in the ordinance, and council's not being asked to act on these, but these are more like the context that the Parking Advisory Committee is asking the council to consider, or in one case, a parallel action. The one is that there's been a good deal of discussion during this process about opening the gate between the University of Mary Washington parking facilities parallel to the end of Sunken Road and Sunken Road, thus opening up Sunken Road as an access and other neighborhood streets as an egress from this parking. This gate has been closed for many years. However, there's a significant amount of university parking now behind that gate. Both surface parking and the Alvey parking garage are right on the other side of that gate. And right now, there's only one way in and one way out of that area, and that's off of Route 1. And it's made further complicated by the fact that as you exit Alvey Drive onto Route 1, you may not turn left. And so anyone wanting to go south out of there has to take a right, go to the signal at Mary Washington Boulevard, and take a U-turn to get onto South Route 1. So the university, early in the process, wanted to add to the discussion the opening of this gate. And what after discussion, what the committee agreed to and asked the council to consider as context as happening on a parallel basis to the actions that council is asked to take, that this gate be open from 7:30 a.m. to 6:15 p.m. Monday through Friday when the university is in session, with the university being responsible for the opening and closing of the gate each day. This was discussed at the College Terrace neighborhood meeting, and I believe it's fair to say Mr. Withers and Dr. Duffy were both there, that the residents believed that this addressed their concerns of an unlimited 24/7 availability of coming and going to the campus through that gate. The final thing is that the committee does believe that given the complexity of what's being recommended, that it should be implemented and then reviewed. And so the committee has landed on a formal review, although there'll be ongoing monitoring, obviously, from the date it's adopted and becomes effective. But that all of this be in effect for one University of Mary Washington academic year from now through essentially early May next year, and then that the Parking Advisory Committee itself, obviously with staff support through collection of data and so forth, and input from the neighborhoods and all those affected by the actions, would then present a formal review to this council, including perhaps recommendations for further modifications by no later than July 21 of next year. And my final comment, and then I'll be glad to take questions, is that both of the ordinances you'll see are designed to be effective the 15th of August of this year, which is designed for the changes that are being recommended to be in place when the students return for the fall semester at the University of Mary Washington. And I'll stop there and be glad. I'm sorry I've spoken a long time, but this has been a very long and involved process.
Thank you. Has the university taken any other action to encourage the use of their garage?
The university during this process has been reviewing its on-campus parking and has taken a number of actions. Dr. Richardson has been a member of the Parking Advisory Committee for the last several months and has been an active participant. I'm not here tonight able to list bullet points or points 1 through 4, but I would say that I'm encouraged that through this process that the university administration generally is much more, this is much more on their radar than it was 18 months ago, and they've been a very active participant, and they understand the nexus between the need for parking on campus to be better utilized.
Mayor?
And the other question I
Ma'am.
might have,
Yeah.
go ahead, you want to speak to that, Vice
I
Mayor
would like
Withers?
to, I'd like to wonder if Dr. Duffy, who chaired this, would like to make some comments before we get too much into questions on that.
Certainly, Dr. Duffy? You there?
Yes, I am. I would mainly like to thank Mr. Fawcett's work and the advisory committee's work on all of this. Their names should be stated: Dr. Richardson, Mr. Withers, Dee Dee Lucky, Bill Beck, Will McIntosh, and Joe Wilson, as well as all the residents of College Heights and College Terrace, and especially members of the College Heights Civic Association, Meredith Beckett, its president, and of course all of the faculty, staff, and students who came out and participated in this process too. I think one of the things Mr. Fawcett always told us is that this was going to help solve some problems, but it wasn't going to fix everything. And that I think, we landed on some compromises that we trust will work in the future, but will always be a work in progress. And I think the suggestions we've made along College Avenue are part of the compromises we've made with the university community. But I'm hopeful that this will work.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy, and we appreciate your work and the Vice Mayor's work on this commission.
Yeah, I'd like
Yes.
to add to Dr.
Mr.
Duffy,
Withers.
this is not going to solve everything, as Dr. Duffy said, and Mr. Fawcett said, and it's not going to make everybody happy, but I think the main thing is we came with a compromise that most folks can live with, and that's what you hope for in this. I would like to add to the gate, the college gate. The university worked with us there. That's their gate. They could really open it and leave it open if they wish to do that. But they worked with us on the time opening and closing, so the neighbors would not be disrupted early in the morning or late in the evenings or in the middle of the night like they had been when it was always open. So I very much appreciate everybody trying to work together. Like I say, everybody's not going to be happy. It's one of those problems that you can't come up with an exact solution with, but I appreciate all the input we did get from the members of the community. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Fawcett, would the concerns and the need of Trinity Church and Christ Lutheran be met by expanding the hours? I'm thinking about the length of a prayer meeting or a group meeting, or the need for the ability to have groups of people there during the week and during the evenings.
When I've spoken to the representatives of the church, the two churches, both have said a 2 hour except by permit restriction would accommodate a significant number of their meetings, but not all, that there would be some that go longer. The challenge we face when we go with a longer period of time is the balance between permitting short-term parking and opening it up. The longer you go, the more tempting it becomes then for others that you don't want to park there, including those from the university campus, to migrate back into the area. there's no specific answer to that. One thing we have discussed is that a 2-hour parking restriction, studies have shown that the average time that vehicles sit in a 2-hour parking zone is a little over 3 hours, because the enforcement officer is not standing there when you pull in and marking that you've been there for 2 hours and 5 minutes and then issuing you a citation. So if you take into account the actual time versus the restricted time, if a 2 hours time period tends to expand, then a 3-hour time period tends to expand even more, and then we risk tipping the balance to where it becomes easier for folks wanting to park on the campus to say, well, I need to be on the campus 3 hours and 20 minutes, so I'll take my chances that I can park in the 3-hour zone and not get a ticket. So this is all taken into account. I can't give you an absolute yes or no answer to that. We are aware, and one example, and we're sympathetic to it, is if there's a funeral at the church.
Exactly.
People will come, attend the funeral, the reception may be at the church later, and they may be there longer than 2 hours. This is one of the reasons that I asked that the council agree to flexibility with some potential further modifications to the map between now and the final adoption of the ordinance, because we do want to continue those discussions that have started in the case of both churches fairly recently on these issues.
It would seem reasonable to make them an exemption or a different set of rules or a different situation. And frankly, yes, it may extend to 3 hours, but the conscientious person who obeys the 2 hours is punished.
No, I appreciate that.
Vice Mayor Withers?
May I ask, and I don't think you went into this, the hours that these are enforced, what are they, I've forgotten that.
Yes, it's Monday through Friday, 7 to 7 in College Heights, and 8 to 7. The 2-hour parking restrictions would be 8 to 7 in the College Terrace neighborhood.
Yeah, okay.
And then on Saturdays in what we're calling College Heights South as well.
Okay. So the weekends are open.
Yeah. One thing that I would
The
point out,
the restriction does not exist on the weekends?
in the main portion of College Heights, there's no weekend restrictions. South of William Street, Saturday, 7 to 4.
That's correct, in College Terrace.
And in College Terrace, it's strictly Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the 2 hours, except by permit. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
One-
So
one-
it's varying from section to section.
It is. We want to keep it as uniform as possible. However, we understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all type of approach, because the parking demands, the parking needs, and quite frankly, the parking encroachments, if you want to talk about that, the types of parking encroachments are not the same, with the obvious example being people who live along Hanover Street and the athletic fields.
Yeah, that's
People
a whole
on
different.
Dandridge Street don't get much athletic type parking, so that's the example. If I could make one more point about the areas where the 2-hour parking restrictions, and we've looked at this from many different angles. If a 2-hour parking restriction lasts until 7 p.m., then you can park there at 5:01 p.m.
And be there.
and be there until the next morning, because you have not been there in violation of the 2-hour restriction by the time that the restriction ends for the day. So that's another factor that's taken into account. That's one of the reasons that for the recent change from 5 to 7 p.m. For the end of day for the 2-hour parking in the downtown, because previously anybody could park just after 3 p.m. downtown and leave their vehicle there until 10 o'clock the next morning. And with all the additional evening activities, retail and restaurant, that have occurred in the last several years in the city, we felt the need to push that later, but I'm getting a little off track now, so I'll stay focused on the current situation.
No, but we did. Thank you for explaining how it really works. Councilor Devine?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Mr. Fawcett, if I could, you answered one of the questions that someone had asked me to clarify, and that was about sort of the evening parking. And I just want to make sure that the community does understand that events like Great Lives and other events that are in the evening, this would not restrict people from parking in that area and attending. So if a Great Lives, for instance, lecture started at 7 p.m., the parking restrictions go to 7, but it would be a 2-hour window. Is that correct? Or is that?
No, in the areas,
Okay.
in the areas in which it's recommended that it be resident permit parking only, the restrictions go to the end time. So, and this was another issue that was greatly debated, is what should be the end time. The university, quite frankly, argued for an earlier time each evening for that very purpose. The Great Lives lectures start at 7:30. As proposed, to park in the neighborhood legally for the Great Lives lectures, you would need to get there at 7 or later. We've talked with the university, we've urged them, and they have agreed to more actively open up the on-campus parking so that those that want to come earlier than that can use the on-campus parking first, and thus perhaps a lesser demand for parking in the neighborhood that could be met by those that do arrive within a half hour of the start of the event. It's only in those areas that would have the 2-hour except by permit that you could park earlier than the end time and still meet that. I know that's
Okay.
a little confusing, but that's the way it landed.
Okay. If I could follow up, there are a couple of questions that people had. One of the, and I don't know if Dr. Duffy or Mr. Withers wants to address this as well, but one of the issues we seemed to deal with the last time this came to us was faculty parking. And we've talked in this about student parking and so forth, but that was not necessarily one of the issues. So I just wanted clarification on that as well. And again, I was a long-term resident of College Heights, and I'm very aware of the issues, and I don't think it's the neighborhood's responsibility necessarily to solve the faculty, parking issue. But I just wanted that clarified. So I know that we can't dictate to the university where the faculty park, but I guess it goes back to an earlier question. Are they opening up more faculty parking?
Well,
I'll be glad to address that in part.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Part of the problem with faculty parking in College Heights is that if we allow faculty to park there, we'd have to allow students. We can't say, no student parking. And I think to the extent that we would do that, I think the students would fill that parking up before the faculty ever got there. So it's that kind of all or nothing problem that caused us to need to do a resident permit parking program the way that we have.
and I would just add to that currently, most of the blocks, I think it's fair to say well over half of the blocks in the College Heights neighborhood, student parking is prohibited, either from no UMW student parking signs or those blocks that are already resident permit parking only. However, only in the smaller percentage of that total that already has resident permit parking only are faculty and staff prohibited from parking. They are not restricted from parking on the blocks that are simply signed no UMW student parking. And for context, in my time here, and we've had this discussion multiple times in the Parking Advisory Committee, probably the first half or more of the time that I've been here and have dealt with parking issues in College Heights, and I really wish I had that time back. I'd be a much younger man. The first half, it was complaints about student parking. In more recent years, it's become more and more about faculty and staff parking in the neighborhoods. And I believe a partial reason for that, not the entire reason, but a partial reason for that is that the university has built buildings in many cases over the past 2 decades on property that previously was surface parking for faculty and staff. And not by design, but by action, have kind of pushed a lot of the faculty and staff parking toward the outer perimeters of the campus, parking lots that are less attractive, less desirable, further away from their offices and classrooms than where they were parking perhaps 20 years ago. And that's all become another variable in this whole equation here. So as Dr. Duffy said, The goal here with the removal of the no UMW student parking is you then have to put something in place that addresses parking in the neighborhoods, not just by students, but by the entire university community. That in and of itself, we believe, will push parking back onto the campus simply because it will not be permitted to arrive 10 minutes before your first class and park on one of the perpendicular streets if there happens to be a space to park there. Or the example I use is certain members of the faculty of the staff at UMW report to work at 5:30 or 6 in the morning to start cooking the breakfast at the dining hall. And once they get there, they park on the side streets, and then their vehicle is there till 1:30 or 2:30, whatever time their shift ends, because there's currently no restrictions for that. And that is a big part of what the attempt is to address here. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
Council Fry?
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. And Mr. Fawcett, I apologize for my tardiness. And I don't know if you touched base
Couldn't
on
find a
it.
place to park, I bet.
I tried to park at 501.
Oh, okay.
How do we address, or what are we doing to address visitor parking for the restricted hours?
Yes. In the areas of the city, and there are a significant number of other areas of the city where resident permit parking is already in place. I alluded to some of those earlier. There is a visitor permit system in place. It's a dashboard permit, whereas for the residents, it's obviously a permanently mounted bumper decal. But the police department has been working recently to make that for lack of a term, a friendlier system to residents. One of the major things they've done is they've extended the validity of visitor permits to a full year. It used to be a much shorter period, and the residents that were in zones would have to renew their visitor permits more frequently. And we have discussed and believe that we have a way of dealing administratively with not only visitor permits, but what if I have a housekeeper that comes twice a week? What if I have home health aide that comes? What if we have a contractor that's going to be working here for three weeks or 2 months? All of those fall into a category of legitimate needs to be parked in the neighborhood, for which the residents then can arrange to obtain permits. And Sergeant Worley of the police department is our liaison, and he's been very actively involved in this process. So we believe we have it covered. Again, if the system is put in place in College Heights and College Terrace and it doesn't work exactly as we think it might, then modifications can be made.
Thank you. Councilor Devine?
That actually was my question, or I just wanted
Okay.
clarification on that. But I also just wanted to, I think everybody heard Dr. Duffy talk about who was involved, but I just want to clarify that as well, that the university and the residents and the civic associations,
Yes.
there was representation from everybody, and this was the recommendation from the entire group. Is that correct, Mr. Withers?
I haven't counted up the number of meetings that we've had, but I will just, in addition to the general parking advisory committee meetings, we've met 2 or 3 times with the College Heights Civic Association. I attended the annual meeting of the College Heights Civic Association. We've had two meetings with the College Terrace neighborhood that were both widely advertised. We've had a forum on the campus that was arranged by Dr. Richardson. So we do believe that we have reached out to and actively engaged the various parties. We haven't heard the same thing from everybody, and not everybody's left every meeting as satisfied with what the recommendations are as others have, but we do believe we've provided adequate opportunity for input.
Okay.
And we actually, Mr. Fawcett, actually took votes at these meetings and said, here's this plan, what do you think of this one, here's this one. So what we've come up with is what a majority of the folks that were at these meetings wanted. And obviously that was a majority, but it wasn't 100%. So we'll have I have some folks in my ward that are not pleased with what we're going to do, and I know that. But at the same time, we can't do one block one way or half a street one way and a half a street another. We have to have some conformity in order for this to work. It's one of those, it's really a tough deal. There's no question about that. So, as Mr. Foster said, and this committee is committed to, we're going to study this. This is an ongoing committee. We're going to study it for the next year. If it needs tweaking, if it needs changing, then we'll come back to the council and say this is what we think we need to do. So, it's not one of the easiest things the mayor ever put me on. I'll tell you that. So anyway, but
One of our more interesting meetings was the night we had 28 people in Mr. Withers' front room. That was a cozy meeting.
And I'm liable to have 28 after you implement this thing in my front door. But anyway.
Mayor, I would add one other point. Public hearing on both of these ordinances has been scheduled for your next meeting prior to you taking second reading on this.
So the next meeting will be a public hearing?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's important
Yes,
for the
ma'am.
public
So
to
there
know.
will be additional opportunity,
Additional opportunity.
formal opportunity for additional input prior to you all considering this for second reading at the June 26th meeting.
Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just, I guess, two general questions, I believe. One, the 500-pound gorilla in the room is the university. And I do realize they had a representative here, and we had one meeting with the students. We came out of the first round of discussions and came up with recommendations, and we're told that the university was thumbs up because they had attended the meetings, and we had line after line after line of people coming up here telling us they did not necessarily agree with where we're going. Like Councilor Devine, I've been involved in this parking issue in College Heights for a few decades, and think a lot of this problem, college when I was there, university now, has brought this partially on themselves over time and some of the decisions they've made. But they are a partner in this community. And my one ask in all this would be that before we take the formal vote, that we do get something specifically from the university saying, we understand these, we might not agree with this, but there is something that we have officially from the university that we have gone through a process they have participated in, and whatever they may feel. Because again, this whole process was about them. And again, I think just touching the bases, being a good neighbor, giving them an opportunity to say whatever they want to say, because this is affecting them. One. Two, from looking at the current plans, we're not doing anything with the college side of College Avenue. So as far as we're concerned, that just stays. And I'm assuming that that is going to stay that way, or are we still looking at taking on the issue of paid parking on the other side? Or are we just saying we're holding everything off now until this 1 year is over, and then we're going to go back and revisit? Because I'd rather have, just to my point, I'd rather have a comprehensive agreement with the university than start playing these little games. We'll do a little bit here, then a little bit here, and then have another argument about what's going on the college, the university side of College Avenue. I mean, if this is sufficient, I'd rather just take the parking meters off the table on College Avenue.
I'll address that and ask Dr. Duffy or Mr. Withers to disagree, but I believe that the proposal to establish paid parking on the university campus side of College Avenue is off the books right now.
Agree. And one
I
other
agree
thing.
with that. The other thing, Mayor, is that, we have been working closely with the university, and I don't think it's necessary to put any in-between step on that. I fully expect we'll get some professors and staff members who will be concerned about this plan, but we looked at some other compromises, and I just don't think they were feasible. So I would recommend moving ahead with item 11C, repealing restrictions on parking on public streets near the University of Mary Washington campus by UMW commuting and resident students.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
unless I'm mistaken, and Dr. Duffy and Mr. Foster can correct me, I believe that the college representative, university representative voted in the affirmative
Yes.
for these actions. So,
Yes, sir.
so that was their official representative. So they voted in
So we have a problem with them just giving them the opportunity to respond in any way, shape, or form they want.
Well, they've already
course.
responded.
Okay, well, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because this is what we said the last time we went around this road with college representative in the room.
Well, we had a different representative the first time, who obviously, the word had not gotten back to the university on all levels. Would you agree, Mr. Foster?
That is correct. And I think what's different in using your terminology, kind of the second round, the forum that was held at the university in April was organized by the university. It was widely advertised on the university campus. And some of those whom you referenced, Mr. Kelly, that appeared here last fall and strenuously objected, attended that meeting and heard what the status was as of that time, and is basically very similar now. So I think that's the differences between the university having had representation, but there hadn't been as significant an effort to reach out beyond just the representative to the university community as there now has been.
Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last comment on this. I can tell you, and I'm not telling the parking committee anything they haven't heard, there's not unanimity anywhere on this, and that sometimes is a good thing. If you don't come to consensus and you work with something, you come up with the best thing you can. Again, the only reason I'm bringing it up is because it is the university, and it is probably one of the largest partners we have in this city. Again, I've fought with them for decades, but I do think it's appropriate in a situation like this and affecting the university that we at least give the opportunity. If you want to present something to the council for a second read, you have that opportunity. I'm not going to say I'm going to agree with it. Again, I've been fighting this battle for a long time, but I think it makes sense to offer them the opportunity to make sure everybody knows exactly where everybody stands on this.
I would then recommend that we contact the university, make sure that they are aware, as they are through their representative. I've already communicated the public hearing on the 26th to Dr. Richardson. But we can certainly emphasize to her and to Dr. Pano that if they choose to either be physically represented at the public hearing or to have a statement entered into the record, that we certainly offer them that opportunity.
That would be fine.
That's a good
We would
way to
offer
do
to
it.
make sure that we would,
Yep.
and I would think we would encourage, we would like to hear specifically from them at the public hearing in an official capacity.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's a good way to do it. Vice Mayor Withers?
Well, I'd just like to add, I think Dr. Duffy met with Dr. Pano a couple of times about this issue. Didn't you, Dr. Duffy, or did you?
I met with staff members, professors. Dr. Pano was not at that meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were to meet with him.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Baruti and I have met with Dr. Pano and Dr. Richardson at least twice on this. And we actually went to the President's Cabinet at the university last summer and made a presentation on the Walker Plan and the status of the work of the committee at that time.
And then I don't understand what the problem is just saying we would really like to hear from you at the public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I would like to move the motion for approval.
Second.
I would like to ask Mr. Fawcett, you seem to anticipate that there might be some tweaking or some changing between now and the second read, and I'm particularly concerned about the impact on the churches, both churches. I understand that fully. And, you know, they're a different animal. They're not a residence, and they have ongoing activities 7 days a week of that, you know, I have varying numbers of people attending, including funerals. And what can we do to make sure that the churches' activities are not curtailed?
We will meet with the churches and do everything we can to reach a balanced decision here. I would not mislead you and say we can accommodate all parking, all daytime parking at all the churches in the neighborhood without doing what I would consider to be an imbalanced view on this. This whole system is a compromise among the actors that are involved and those that are affected by it. And so we will certainly try to reach a balanced conclusion to this, and I fully expect you to expect me to report to you on this at the June 26th meeting, and then you all will need to decide whether you are satisfied with where we are on it at that point. I don't have solutions tonight. I'm open to ideas, but we don't have any solutions tonight that I believe meet all the needs of all those located in the neighborhoods in a way that doesn't create an imbalance toward other actors in the neighborhood.
I may vote on first read, but I will not vote on second read if we don't accommodate churches being able to continue to live in those neighborhoods. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Councilor Kelly?
Just a quick question to the city attorney, if I could. We've done tweaking of things like this before in the past, and it goes from tweaking to significant change requiring. You don't see any of that coming into play, or does it depend on what kind of recommendations are made, or do you think we're on firm ground on this?
I anticipate only tweaking would occur between first and second reading, and there's no problem with moving forward with the first reading, public hearing, and action.
You know, we've done that before with the understanding that there's going to be something worked out between our first approval and the second and the final. I know an awful lot of work's gone into this, and I also know it's not a very easy thing, but
Mayor?
our neighborhood churches are important.
Dr. Duffy.
Mayor Greenlaw?
Yes, Dr. Duffy.
I think we're probably just talking about a difference of 2 hours or 3 hours, except by permit. I think that would address most of the church's issues. I think that's what I mean by tweak.
To be perfectly transparent here, there is a difference between what the Lutheran Church is asking as far as the area where their daytime patrons and attendees could park, and what I believe is feasible without encroaching, and I don't want to use that term, directly in front of without asking residents whose neighbors have resident permit parking on their block to forego that to permit daytime parking of church patrons. And that's not a value statement on my part. I'm simply saying that that's the distance between what Pastor Martin has asked in conversations I've had with her and what I understand she's asking the council to do, and what I would be able to recommend tonight to the Parking Advisory Committee and eventually to the City Council. So that's kind of the nub of the issue that we need to work on between now and 2 weeks from now.
Well, I agree with you on that, and your point on that. I was mainly referring to College Avenue, or
Correct.
Trinity Lutheran.
Correct.
I mean, Trinity Episcopal.
Yeah. Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Going from 2 to 3 hours is more than a tweak. We've been debating 2, 3, and 4 hours on any of these parking zones for a hell of a long time. By tweaking, I'm assuming in regards to the Lutheran Church, you're just talking about extending certain zones a little bit farther out to make accommodations for the churches. Is that correct?
Well, I don't want to put myself in a corner here. If it's going from 2 to 3 hours in
That's a change.
a 4 or 5 block area of, I think on that map of College Heights, there's 62 blocks that are proposed for resident permit parking. So I guess it becomes a matter of proportion. If we were to come back in here 2 weeks from now and say, let's go to 3 hours on these 4 or 5 block faces, a block face being one side of one block of a street, is that a more significant change, given that we're changing 4 or 5 block faces out of 60-some blocks? I guess there's probably no absolute answer to that, whether that's a minor change or a moderate change or beyond tweaking. I don't want to get into, I'm not the one to make that decision. I propose we bring something to you, and then you all can decide whether that's something that says, well, we need to first read this again, or our goal in bringing it to you tonight and bringing you second reading on the 26th of June is that would give our Public Works traffic crews about 6 weeks to change out the signs, to take the No UMW student signs down, to put up new signs, and it's going to take close to that period to be ready with the new system by the 15th of August, and we really believe strongly that we do need to implement it at the beginning of a semester. It will be much more, I think, confusing for everybody to try to do it if the students come back and live under the current system for a month, and then we try to change it mid-semester to a new system.
Now, I understand the timing.
Thank you.
And I'll assume that College Heights will have this out soon enough that College Heights wants to respond to it. Specifically, they can do it at the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, if there's no further discussion, the motion has been made and seconded. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes
Yes.
7-0.
What you
I
need?
believe that was just the first of the two items.
That was actually the first of the two items. That's correct. We have two specific items regarding this.
Mayor, at
Yes.
this time, I'd like to pose the amending the residential permit parking program as submitted.
Second.
Cast your votes.
Motion passes
Duffy supports. Duffy, yes.
7-0.
Thank you.
Again, I appreciate the amount of work and time and effort, and we will continue to work with the churches and the residents to get the best possible solution here. Item 11E is our city manager's update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we've spoken about parking a bit. I'll just add a little bit to parking. We have instituted a pilot program for this summer. June, July, and August, we will have a free shuttle downtown. I do bring people's attention to that. That free shuttle is Friday and Saturday evenings from 6 to 10 p.m. We are working on better marketing to elevate that offering to folks. Again, the point of all that is parking is available and open, and in fact, we'll even bring you to it by way of our trolley downtown. Again, free trolley service, dinner time, Friday and Saturday evenings. Last weekend, we had 53 folks take advantage of it on Friday evening and 18 on Saturday. Again, we'll step up our marketing. We do want folks to know that there is an offering to get folks around downtown. So come be with us all summer. I'd also remind folks that the spots that are readily available, on average about 200 spots are readily available Friday and Saturday evenings at the VRE parking lot, as well as the Sophia Street Garage. Again, on average about 200 spots are available. So again, ample parking, free trolley. What can't you like about the city? Come visit and be with us. Also, highlight that we have our broadband survey still out and available to folks. We've had about 200 or so residents jump in so far. We'd like to have more, so please take an opportunity to get on our website and take our broadband survey. We do want to understand what our residents feel about opportunities as far as broadband, as well as our businesses. So again, that has been expanded through the end of June. I'll also tell folks, of course, that we are studying sewer issues. You may have heard a bit about that recently, but we will have a sewer smoke test in College Heights. That is an effort to understand potential inflow and infiltration issues related to our stormwater sewer and sewer issues, again, in College Heights and College Terrace. So just be aware of that. That's happening this week. Also, remind folks that the annual asphalt rehabilitation program is underway. Route 1 is next on the list, so that work concludes by the end of this month. Be aware of those evening activities. Also, remind folks that the library parking lot is now under construction. With the expansion project, we will double parking at the library. That project should wrap up this month as well, so more parking on the way for the library. Lastly, I'll remind folks that we have a special concert, The Vision of America, held by the Fredericksburg Community Concert Band. Will be at Herkamp Park on June 13th at 7 p.m. Herkamp Park. Please join us at 7 p.m. on June 13th. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Baruti? Councilor Fry?
No questions, but due to my tardiness, I wanted to see if I could just say something real quick about Midnight Madness, if that's okay, Mr. Baruti.
Yes, of course.
All right, thank you. I just want to let the public know that Midnight Madness starts on June 22nd, and want to publicly thank the council for making this a council initiative. Once again, I think we're going into, year number 4 I feel like I've been here a while now. I met with the police department this morning, and we met at Walker Grant Middle School at 7 o'clock this morning. And we gave the kids a bunch of energy, and we passed out a bunch of flyers and registration forms. So Midnight Madness for kids ages 11 to 17, live in the 22401 zip code, free bus rides, free food, free good time, safe environment protected by the police department. And I have to say thank you to the Parks and Rec department. I'm going to miss somebody because that usually happens, but Parks and Rec department runs the program, and police department is involved, and all the city staff that come in and work on Fridays to make this event happen. But again, I want to say to the council, thank you all again, because it's a solid program, and it can only get better. So I'm happy to be a part of it, and thank you guys.
Thank you, Council Fry, for hanging in there with that good program. The calendar is included. We are going into closed session. Could someone please make the motion?
Madam Mayor, I move we go into closed session under Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711, Section 839, for the discussion of confidential information prepared by the city related to the attraction of a multi-purpose outdoor and recreational venue where competition or bargaining is involved and where disclosure of the information would adversely affect the financial interest of the city of Fredericksburg.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes
I vote yes.
7-0.
Thank you. Thank you. We will adjourn to upstairs, and Councilor Duffy will